Run It Studios presents the All Things Community Podcast, hosted by Trina Wilcox. Welcome to the All Things Community Podcast, brought to you by Run It Studios. I'm Trina Wilcox, and I'm really excited about my guest today because it's another one of the reasons I do love social media. I know it can be a lot with the way we have social media in our faces all the time, but sometimes you get to create with great communities. And Lorraine Ansell, welcome. You're my guest today. I'm so glad to meet you via TikTok and now on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Trina. It's wonderful to meet you. We have been following each other for a while, and I'm just so excited we've made this happen. And yes, I agree. Sometimes the community on social media can be really, really good.
Yes, it can. Ours kind of connected, I believe, over our community of chronic conditions. We both have things that we deal with in that aspect, and then we'll talk about that, and then also your new project that you're sharing with the world. So let's start with how did you decide to go ahead and start using TikTok, and did you have in mind, did you even put a game plan together? I know some people are very meticulous about it, and other people just post what comes to mind.
Exactly. Do you know what? I heard about TikTok quite a few years before, I would say about, I can't remember now, maybe 2018 or so, because a neighbor's granddaughter was visiting and she was showing us TikTok. And I had never heard of it before. And she was talking about how you could stitch and how you could do things. And I was just like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Fast forward 2020 and the world goes into lockdown. Okay. So, I had been doing a job at a recording studio and I was voiceover and there was no work. We all had to, that was it. That's it. You're at home. And there I was at home and two things happened at home. I thought, well, I'll download TikTok because, hey, why not? And then at the same time, I realized that I think something was going on quite seriously with my health. So these two kind of things came together and it was brilliant. And, at that point, we're all watching TikTok and, oh, there goes my cat. And we're watching TikTok and there's, people are dancing, they're doing the dance trends and, I'm getting more into it. And at the same time, TikTok is showing me people with my own sort of diagnosis, which I didn't really know I had. And a long story short, a few years later, I got diagnosed and I had been using TikTok just to post random things. There was no real strategy. There was no game plan. And then suddenly when I had this diagnosis, I thought, wow, I can use TikTok as a way to express myself as a late diagnosed person. This was a way to showcase a condition which is rare, although I feel is rarely diagnosed. And also just to find a community and support out there, because I was like, I can't be the only one who this has happened to.
What, if you don't mind sharing, what were you experiencing and how long did it take you to get a diagnosis?
So I'm late diagnosed and I got diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder in my early 40s. Now, I ended up writing a whole book and kind of realizing that I had been having symptoms of this condition ever since I was a toddler. Mm-hmm. So that's a long time. That is a really long time. And I had been seeing the doctors. I had been going back. I had blood work. I had hormone tests. That's not quite normal, but you're sort of okay, carry on.
Yeah.
And there were all these things, people would say, that's a bit odd. I would see the physios. There's a long history of stuff. And so for me, that kind of led to me processing it really differently by writing a book about it and talking about it, but with no real game plan because my condition is very fluctuating. As I realized, I would be, this was the era of lockdown. We were all at home. And prior to that, I had a really busy life. I was, traveling for work, traveling to and from work. And without that work, without that travel, I was still exhausted. I was on the
Mhm.
sofa exhausted, and my cat would take every opportunity to sit on me in that state.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't move from the sofa. What is going on? So yeah, I kind of started to realize and unravel this big mystery, basically.
Yeah. That is, it is different. It hits different when you know that you've unconsciously moved your baseline to the point that you just went and moved through it. And it took not going anywhere for you to realize, wait, I'm tired and not, you know, redlining all the time. So, how did you kind of change? Did you change your lifestyle? Did you change habits? What was different for you once you got the diagnosis?
Oh, absolutely. So prior to sort of diagnosis and really understanding what was going on, um I had thought I was really unfit. Now this is an example. I would get quite breathless going upstairs. And I thought, gosh, I must be really unfit. Like one flight of stairs and I would be out of breath and I can't, I was heaving to try and find air. And I thought that can't be right. So what did I do? I would go to the gym. I would go to another dance class until it got to the point I was going to 10 dance classes a week in this mistaken assumption that I was
Yeah.
unfit. And if I just did a bit more, if
Yeah.
I just kept going that little bit more. And after diagnosis and kind of feeling very validated by the diagnosis, but also a little bit like, what do I do now? Because there is no
Right.
cure, right? There's no cure. There's no real pathway. There's no medication. There's nothing magical that can make it,
Mhm.
all fixed. And I realized that I had to change. And all of the things that I had previously taken in as, you've got to push through, you've got to, work through the pain. I didn't even realize I was in pain. I really
Oh,
didn't realize
yeah.
because I had normalized it. I had taken that working, mindset so much that I was just pushing through all of the time. And lockdown really was that opportunity to be like,
Huh.
oh, oops.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I changed my life. I became really mindful of everything. Like,
Yeah.
how am I feeling in this moment? Um, and I didn't sort of a- attack everything with a why, but I looked curiously at every aspect of my life with a why. Like,
Mhm.
how am I sleeping? What are the best sleep positions? What food am I eating? When am I eating this food? How much am I eating? The portion size, all of this. And I started to play. I started to iterate. I started
Yeah.
to, does this work? Does that not work? Okay, this worked today, but it didn't work then. And you know, and from that, I actually got more information, and I was just able to kind of change my mindset and accept much more of what was happening to me.
You do have to be your own health advocate. I've said that so many times. And I think the biggest challenge is you're so tired to advocate for yourself, even when you need to do it most. But it's so important that we keep sharing that. How was the support from your doctor, though? I mean, since there's not, a magic cure or even a medication regimen that you can do.
I have been incredibly lucky because when I did get my diagnosis, they, I mean, I kind of was expecting one diagnosis, but at the same time, I ended up getting two others, not officially, but they were like, because EDS kind of has other comorbidities with it, associated with it. And
Mhm.
one is called POTS and one is called MCAS.
Okay.
MCAS is mast cell activation syndrome, which is when you have a reaction to things. And POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which for me manifests in a sort of temperature dysregulation. I'm always cold, although now I'm going through perimenopause. I'm always a little bit too hot now. So it's all very confusing. It's all learning. Um, and so I didn't know. And so they said to me when I got the EDS diagnosis, they said, you might want to look into these other two areas because that might tell a bigger story for you. Since then, I've moved away from that place where I got the diagnosis. But, you know, in my case, my eyes are particularly affected by which I believe by the EDS. I have high myopia, and a few years ago I had a detached retina, and my retinal specialist and the eye doctors have been absolutely amazing. And you know, they can see that there are issues. They can see. So, you know, I've been really lucky in that way. But like you said, you have to advocate for yourself, because a lot of doctors don't know about this condition. But for me, it answers so many decades of symptoms and issues. And I'm quite vocal about it. You know, they say, oh, well, your blood tests are normal and your hormone levels are normal. And I will be a bit cheeky and I might say, yeah, but none of those blood tests and hormone tests can tell you that I have a detached retina and that I've had surgery.
Yeah.
So I'm always kind of, you know, pointing things out. And I don't know how well it goes down, but, you know, I do point out things like that because it's not just about what the blood tests say.
Absolutely. It sounds like there was a sense of relief that kind of came with the diagnosis. What other emotions have occurred since then?
I mean, my first one really was vindication. I was
Good.
like, aha, yes, I knew it.
Something.
There was something. You know, I
Yeah.
hadn't been making it up all these years. You know,
Right.
I had been gaslighting myself. I have like, you know, and all of those silly little accidents I'd had and injuries. I'm like, now this is making more
Mm.
sense. But then my second one was kind of surprise and shock because I didn't, in that appointment, I didn't expect to be told that I'm in pain. And I really didn't know what to do with that because
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? I'm not in pain. You know,
I'm
I'm
just
40 years
tired.
old. I'm just tired the whole time. Sure, my knee doesn't kind of do what it wants to do anymore, but that's because I just did too much dance. Or, you know, I was kind of making these stories up in my head
Yeah.
about, no, they're not migraines. What are you talking about? It's just because I slept funny. You know, and
Yeah.
I look back in that, well, in my ignorance, because I didn't know. Because
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. How would I have known these things? But I
Yeah.
knew enough to know that something was happening.
Yeah.
Um, so there was that surprise. There was a bit of confusion because I was a bit like, oh well, oh yeah, that is pain then. But everyone said that I wasn't in pain. But you know, and there was this kind of I was
Yeah.
playing 40 years of appointments in my head. But then I was like, what do I do with this now?
Yeah.
How do I make this work for me? You know? And that's the journey that I'm on. That's the journey.
Yeah.
How can I make this work?
Well, and how do you dig in and prioritize that? Because a lot of people don't. They leave with the diagnosis and think, well, I can't do anything about it. And it is what it is. And that can be just as detrimental as, chasing a diagnosis.
I mean, all of this takes up a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It just when you do have a chronic illness, anything takes up energy. But
Mhm.
you know, going to appointments, you know, it's a full-time job.
It is.
It is a full-time job, and it requires so much in terms of your own resources to lock in and do these things. But for me, I did leave a bit like I mean, I was riding on that high of that, aha, I've got it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, hang on a second. I don't have this at all.
Yeah.
I do not have this at all. What do I do? And so I started to journal. That
Mhm.
was the thing. I started to journal for this because how do you explain to your own self 40 years of things happening?
Mhm.
Um, you know, all of these situations. And even now today, you know, I ended up writing so much, I actually made it. into a book about pain and, how to love pain. Um, but even now, I'm finding new things out and new things that work and other things that don't work. So it's like it's a daily process, I would
Yeah.
say.
And I think too, there's that. I think it's so important for you to keep talking about it because maybe if someone would have talked about it, you wouldn't have had to go so long without a diagnosis. Then there's that line that I feel like, and I don't know, there's kind of this more of an age demographic where we didn't talk about things. And it was like, no, you deal with it in silence. And how do, if that was even, did that happen for you at all? Did you ever have a point where it was like, no, I need to keep this to myself and shut up? Or did you, because I've had those moments where like nobody wants to hear it. And then I think, well, what if someone needs to hear it? So how do you resolve all of that? Or was it even a thought?
Right? Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Sometimes you can get that cringe factor of like, oh, everyone knows this. I'm not going to post about it. I'm not going to speak up about this. Or, you're just like, oh, no. Um, but then every time I post, I'm reminded of two things. Yes, this can help somebody else,
Uh-huh.
but it can also help me.
Yes.
Because so many times I've posted, like I posted a while back about like, I get massive reactions to mosquito bites, like huge things. I did not know this was a thing. I posted about it and somebody said, "Oh yeah, that's called skeeter syndrome." I'm like, "What?
Huh?
What? I'm in my mid 40s and I'm learning about this now. I have been ever since I was little, I have had these reactions to this, to other bites. And what?"
Yeah.
And so I still learn from it, and that's why I like to keep
Good.
posting. But if I'm learning, that means other people will learn from my posts. And one
Yeah.
of the big things I post about is eye issues, because a lot of people with hypermobile EDS or other EDS, but mostly hypermobile EDS, we're talking about joints. And a lot of doctors, especially, or other people tend to think there's no point diagnosing it because it's just joints. And I'm always here like, aha, but let's think about other places where connective tissue is.
Yeah.
Oh, everywhere. And in my case, my eyes. Like I went to when I had the detached retina, the retinal specialist looked at me and went, "Oh, yes, HEDS. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well," and I went, "What, you've heard about this?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, it's connective tissue. And your eyeballs are all connective tissue. Your retina is connective tissue." Right. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this is one of the presentations of something like, a connective tissue disorder. I get a lot of issues with my eyes. So I talk about it
Yeah.
because, you know, I knew a lot of the warning signs ever since I was little because it's already happened to a few family members. So and already the opticians and all of the eye doctors had already told me from a young age this detached retina was highly likely for me. It took 40 years to happen, but I knew when it happened to go immediately to hospital to
Oh
get
my
help, right?
goodness. Yeah.
And that's why I talk about these things, because I had that information, I had that awareness. And if it helps somebody else, and I know it has, some people have DM'd me with some issues and they're like, "Thank you," because otherwise I would not have known.
Yeah.
And it's happened to me a few times. I remember I had some eye issues maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, and I went to the hospital. This was a specific eye hospital in London. It's called Moorfields, and I went to their eye A&E, like emergency room. And I went and I'm like, "I'm not sure. Can you see?" And they did all the tests and everything. And then, thankfully, nothing had happened then. But I said, "Oh, I feel a bit funny coming," and because nothing had happened. And they said, "Look, you know what? Come, come. If you have an issue, it's always better to be safe than sorry."
Yeah.
And with your health, I think especially if you're somebody with chronic conditions, there are moments you're like, "Oh, do I go? Do I not go?" But there are points where you have to
Yeah.
be like, yes. And one of
Yeah.
those is eyes. If you get these things, go, go
Yeah.
and get them seen to.
The eyes get overlooked also with arthritis. And that was something that we had a whole episode about that because a lot of times people don't realize how important keeping on top of that is because your body can attack same thing, the tissues, everything.
Oh, wow. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so true because nobody really thinks about the eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Very important. So you
Very
through
important.
this you were journaling. When did you realize you had enough for a book?
For about 6 months in, I had
Oh,
so much
oh.
info. I
Yeah.
had so much info, and I was just like, huh,
Ah,
oh, okay. Wow, this could help somebody. This could help somebody. Um, and it could help. What I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about pain
mm-hmm.
because I was surprised to hear that. I was surprised to hear that I was in pain. And then I started to look at pain, and I was just like, huh, wow, why are we hiding away from pain? Why are we dismissing pain? Why are we, why are we not having open dialogues about pain? I mean, we all know how we've all been dismissed by doctors or medical professionals, or even our own selves. We're dismissing of it, and and I thought, why can't we talk about pain in the same way that we talk about mental health or neurodivergence, or you know, and I felt starting that conversation was really important because it gets overlooked all the time and it never gets taken seriously. And so I personally wanted to have a different relationship with pain. If for 40 years, even though I didn't know that I was in pain, could I start having a different relationship with pain? Could I integrate pain somehow into my daily life? Could I love pain? And by loving pain, I mean being kind and considerate, because people had often said, well, don't think about the pain. And how can you not think about something which is there constantly, 24/7? It's with you. It's never going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost saying, don't think about a big part of yourself, isn't it, really? So that's really what I wanted to kind of uncover. And in my book, I talk about all these different experiences and saying, for me to love pain, I have to love all of these experiences, appreciate them, and kind of allow them to process.
So if you weren't realizing you were in pain, then some would say, well, what a blessing. You don't even know, you don't feel it. Can you kind of describe how you do perceive being uncomfortable versus what maybe an average person might perceive as pain?
So this is the thing. My first memory of pain is as a toddler with my feet and
Okay.
the soles of my feet. They still hurt the same as they have hurt since I was a
Mhm.
toddler. The flesh just burns, and it has always burnt in this throbbing way, as if I had done a marathon. Right? I could dance a marathon maybe, but not run
Yeah.
one. In fact, I have told the doctors because my pelvis is very hypermobile. I can't do the splits anymore. Running is not really advised for me, and neither is doing like split squats type thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd always had that pain, and when you have that pain as a toddler, how would I know? How would I assumed everyone
Yeah.
else had this pain. I assumed this was the human experience.
Yeah.
Um, so, sometimes I'll get it in my hands. Sometimes I'll get to the point where I, I cannot stand even touch because it can get so painful. The headaches, the migraines, and I never considered I was in pain because I was pushing through.
Uh-huh.
I thought, well, if I was in pain, then I would be screaming. I would be screaming in pain in the corner, rolled up in a ball. And I've rarely experienced that manifestation of it,
Yeah.
mostly because in my case, I go very quiet. As you've noticed, I'm very chatty. I'm very expressive, and I love snacking. I love food. And I noticed when I am in pain, I go incredibly quiet. I go withdrawn. I'm not hungry. I do not want to eat. And I have alerted family members and friends that if that is the case, then something is quite wrong.
Hmm.
So I did a lot of unlearning and relearning. And that for me is the thing, because I feel a lot of people have this idea of what somebody in pain is like, but sometimes it's the person who's very quiet and has withdrawn and has sat down. And that's what it was like for me. I would come home from work and sit down for a good hour in front of the TV, and now I realize I would disassociate. I
Wow.
had completely kind of vanished. Um, and then slowly, as I kind of recovered from that, I would make my dinner. I started batch cooking in my early 20s because I couldn't cope making dinner during the week.
Hmm.
Um, and all I could do was put something in the microwave. And
Yeah.
even today, I still will eat a ready meal, or sometimes I'll buy kids' meals, like toddlers' meals, um, just as something to eat
Yeah.
that I know will be nutritious.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's why I kind of thought I never had the language for it. And I'd always been told you're not in pain. And after a while, when you hear that message, by the time you get to about, I was probably I was a teenager. I was like, okay, so this isn't pain then. And
Yeah.
that sticks, right? That sticks.
Pain is a signal, and you were learning to ignore the signal that you
That's it.
needed to get. Yeah.
Exactly.
So when you started understanding the signals and now you've got the diagnosis of the signals, has that changed your perception of the pain?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, before I would have pushed through so much that I would have burnt out quite often.
Okay.
Um, and now I've changed the mindset to kind of think of pain as a dance partner, and that
Okay.
we're always learning together. We're trying to learn a new dance. Maybe this week it's the foxtrot, maybe next week it's the tango. Um, but having that idea now has allowed me to be, instead of very confrontational with the pain and be like, right, that's it, we must stop, this is awful, I'm just so
Yeah.
in pain. This has allowed me a little bit more flexibility and said, oh, okay, I can now understand there are signals of pain and what will lead to that pain, what will trigger that pain. So now I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm going to pace myself. I'm going to sit down,
Yeah.
maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, but I'm going to sit down. I'm going to wear my braces. I'm going to wear my supports,
Yeah.
because all of these things are incrementally small, but they're still incremental. So
Mhm.
I can be more me for a little
Yeah.
bit longer, right?
Good. Excellent. Excellent. Well, when has your book already been published?
Yes, it
Is
is
it
out now.
available?
Yes, available online. So just, it's called The Surrender Agenda by Lorraine Ansell. And it really is just a memoir, basically, of learning to love pain.
Do you think you'll have a follow-up book?
Yes, I do have plans.
Oh, good.
Maybe a children's book, maybe, um, and I've got a few ideas of things. So yeah, I'm playing around with a few things. As with a chronic illness, it's things
Mhm.
fluctuate a lot. So
Yes.
ideas come
Yes.
and go. Some things stay on the back burner. Some things come forward. Um, and there's always another priority that comes up. So we'll see what comes out. But I'm excited about some of my ideas.
Good. What is something positive that you have pulled from all of this?
That's a fabulous question. I would say I have entered a new relationship with pain,
Hmm.
and therefore myself. And I personally feel that having done so, I've unmasked a lot. I was hiding a lot of, neurodivergence. I was hiding a lot of pain. And so by doing this, I have been able to tap into a new me, which is quite exciting, really, because
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was this me here. So and to honor both myself and the pain. And I really felt that I found a deepness and a richness that I hadn't anticipated would be there.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate getting connected with you. I hope you'll come back. Tell us
Yes.
again the title of your book and where we can go to find it.
Yes, it's called The Surrender Agenda by Lorraine Ansell, and it is available online in both paperback, um, ebook, and audio. And it is on Amazon, so please look it up. And yeah, I'm excited for people to read and listen to it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. You can find more videos and link to whichever platform you want to watch or listen from runitstudios.com. Thank you. This has been Run It Studios Presents, the All Things Community Podcast, hosted by Trina Wilcox.